revenue bond for improvements, including fiber optic, something or other. I don't even have the title in mind, but I don't want to just make it sound like there's no fiber optic even involved in this thing. I know smart grid is, but fiber, and I think probably legally, they never explained to me what we could or couldn't put in that title, but the legal people also told me that if you don't like that, you don't do it. They said it's the board's decision to go for this electric utility. The legal people are there to say that what we have in front of them is legal and they'll support it. But if we don't like it as a board, we don't have to do it. So I still go back to when the referendum went out for the vote and the people said they wanted to look at fiber optic for Vinton, and is it okay? And then said, let's have the utility run it. First of all, I thought the city's going to pay for it. I know those would be utility funds. Now we've come a long way in several years. We've gone from what Todd had on his financial analysis of the electric utility revenue was going to be 25.6% of the whole project. Now we're up to about 50%.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to step in, if at all possible. I know you're hitting a bunch of topics there, but I just want to clarify some things, if you wouldn't mind, before going any farther.
I'd rather wait till I had you clarify it, Mike. But I just thought that. Because there's one other point I was going to make. The dollar amount isn't really the issue. Oh, I know it's the 20, and maybe I know you're going to clarify this, Michael, but it's still the 25%. And now what I was told today was $7.5 million is on the electric utility and $6.8 million is on the telecommunications. And in front of us all along we've had 25%, which again makes it look more like it's a telecommunications project with some minor players as electric utility. And now it just looks like it's over half of it's electric utility and lesser half is telecommunications. So that bothers me. Go ahead, Mike. I was about that.
I want to start at a little higher level here and just clarify a couple items. The first piece is that the referendum did two things. The first thing it did was it established a separate communications utility. So that was step one of a two-step process with the referendum. The second step of that process was creating the Vinton Communications Utility Board that shall be comprised of the same membership as the Vinton Municipal Electric Utility Board. That was clear from the time of referendum, and you've been operating under that for the last 2 years. So I just want to start with that. The second piece I want to hit is in regards to the project cost and some of the other project factors. The values of the actual project financing and the composition of those from the meeting in August to proceed with FAR till today are effectively unchanged. You took real bids that FAR put together in a bid package that covers material, contractors, and installation of a number of line item projects, both of which were covered in the capital improvement plans that this board reviewed at the previous meeting. Those two capital improvement plans are then the basis for the individual financing components of the overall project. The three key portions of financing for the project are unchanged from what we reviewed in August. The three main portions of the financing are: one, the fiberhood feeder distribution network. That distribution system of the fiber infrastructure is the type of capital improvement that electric utilities, not just municipals like yourselves, but privates and publics and co-ops like the ones surrounding Vinton's service territory, are currently installing on their systems absent any other type of purpose. And that's irregardless of the number of customers that they have. Folks like Tom that are GM and folks like Todd that are former GMs, they understand the value of that fiber infrastructure to an electric utility implicitly. For the rest of us, we've had to learn and read, but the correspondence that we've seen both from publicly available sources and the consultants that you've hired is very clear that this kind of distribution set network has the ability to have value to the electric system absent any other business purpose. The capacity on that we know has value today, but we don't even understand the value this will have 20 years from now. So let's set that as one bucket. The other bucket's related to the potential for the communications utility to pursue business, like the type of residential triple play services that I think people expected at the time of referendum, are a separate bucket from what we're talking about today. That type of equipment and the type of electronics that are going to be used for the initial system, if pursued, are specific to the telecommunications utility and will be evaluated at that time. Those are already articulated in the capital improvement plans that you've got for the VMCU utility. The last piece of the pie is the potential for some startup working capital for the telecommunications utility. Again, telecommunications type purpose. The purpose of the agenda item right now, setting the public hearing for the potential for an electric financing down the road, is set to be flexible and to be conservative. So when you see the value of 7.5 million, you should be understanding that is a not to exceed number. It's a not to exceed number because the public hearing process, as you're well aware, takes 2 formal meeting steps, so today and then 2 weeks from now, plus Cindy's posting in the local newspaper of the notice of public hearing for 2 weeks from today. We want to make sure that during that process, we cover any potential projects that could be financed. I'm going to come back to that. And we have an amount that's able to cover the capital costs that we think we could potentially incur, related issuance costs, related potential reserves, and any other items that might fall under this so we don't have to come back again. That's the flexibility on the dollar amount. The intention for the projects financed is unchanged from August. Finally, as it relates to the projects here, and the reason that working with the attorneys we've included the stated items that are reflective of the electric utilities capital improvement plan is because we know, while we do have cash to pay for some of these projects as a pay-go basis over the next 5 years, if we choose to, the project cost related to the distribution network for the fiber optic system that's going to be valuable to the electric utility could come in at a lower cost ultimately than what we've got articulated. That financing then would have potential for excess proceeds which we can't redeem until a future date. Therefore, it would be beneficial to have the flexibility to cover some of the potential other big ticket capital projects if necessary, rather than sit on that cash, despite the fact that we expect to just cash flow those payments for those other capital projects today. So the public hearing resolution today in front of you is providing flexibility not for just the dollar amount, but the variety of projects. It's not obligating you to take any action, borrow any amount, just restricting you from nothing more than that amount, and not tying you down to a limited scope of potential projects. So there was thought into each of those portions, and they all tie back to our original discussion back in August. The nice thing for you is that you have actual bids in hand versus the estimates we had at that August date. I apologize for being long-winded, but I really thought it was important to clarify those statements.
And that made me think of what I forgot when you that also the attorney said that any value to the utility is value enough, for the bond. So what Mike was saying is whether it's a whole lot of value or a little value, that's enough for the attorneys to be happy that it is increasing the value of our electric utility. So that's also the plus side then. It doesn't, and doesn't have to be 50% of it has to be value. It just is there value. Is there value in our minds? Is there value in the public's minds that we have increased the value of our utility? Not a lot of it. That's kind of soft economic development, all that crap they talk about. But the fact is, but again, from just the legal standpoint of covering our tails, which is what this all been about, is making sure we're following the law. Is the attorneys were happy with that, and I think we'd agree there's value to it. Go ahead, Mike.
So do you think by putting the conversion in there, that helped us get more funding? Helped us get to the 7.5?
No.
Just by putting more projects in there?
No, wouldn't have changed if you changed that word or not.
Okay.
It's there for flexibility. Again, there's no need that you'd have to spend money there, but if you've got flexibility, that is the biggest. We went through the CIP at the last meeting. That's the biggest ticket item you've got on your near to midterm capital improvement plan.
Right.
So this is standard practice for any public hearing that we do with electric utilities. We'll do other potential electric system improvements. We'll do future voltage conversions, even though, like in your case, it's something that a lot of folks might be able to cash flow, depending on what they've got either in the bank or from an annual basis. it's just smart to keep yourself some flexibility, because otherwise, you've got an entire multi-step process to go through again.
Okay.
So it just gives us a lot more options to spend the money that we're either going to be getting or have.
You've still got operational decisions that could affect the ultimate financing. So, you know, it's not going to be like your home mortgage or your car loan where, you know, if you win the lottery, you can just pay it off that next day. In the municipal bond market, at least for the electric financing, the way that that's going to work is that you're going to have, the earliest redemption is going to be 5 years if I do a great job, and 7 years if I do an okay job, and 10 years if you hire somebody else. So, you know, I think it's important to know that you don't want to be sitting paying on interest on dollars that aren't going to be going to capital projects. So, again, that's the flexibility that we standard put in these resolutions.
Why again, though, you tried to tell me on the phone and I didn't get the answer, I didn't get tonight still, that it went from 25% on the electric revenue and 68% or something on the telecommunications bond to over 50% on the...
That's never changed, Mike. I think what you're trying to pull out of that is some type of split in terms of the purpose or some of the distribution network system. And as I'd articulated a couple times in the past, that's a estimate of what we think the split use could potentially be. We know those are moving targets, and historically, if we look at other municipal utilities in Iowa that have done this, that type of joint use agreement or lease arrangement that they have changes through time, as we don't necessarily know even the technology we're going to have 5-10 years down the road and what that's going to look like. In all instances here, the electric utility is owning this asset that's going to have value for them and potentially other sources down the road. That electric utility then is going to be able to charge effectively for the use of that asset, just like your water system would for putting a cell tower or a cell signal on the top of your water tower. It's the same type of ancillary type potential revenues down there. Now, the analysis, Mike, that I believe you're referring to is a split where we tried to take a initial look at that for some planning purposes. That's effectively unchanged till today. The difference here is simply that you're seeing it rolled up into the same transaction. This is the same matrix that we discussed in August. There's no change.
It went from 25% to over 50%. I still understand. It's Todd said he tweaked the FAR numbers from 25 to 20, he moved them like 1% or something like that.
Yeah.
And so we go from, okay, it seemed to me at the time that's a pretty important number that he tweaked it just 1%, and now all of a sudden it's over 50%. But I know you got voltage conversion numbers in there and things like that. So
no, there's
again, I don't care. It's not that big a deal, except the fact it still seems like we're shifting the emphasis of this whole thing over to an electrical project, and it isn't. It's a fiber optic, internet, cable, and telephone project. And I just, when I go to the public hearing, and there's a lot of people out in this community, they're electric customers, I don't know if they're coming to the public hearing or not, but I don't want to have them look like we're not being straightforward. If we just, that's my only concern. The dollars I don't care about. We've said we're going to go ahead with this. I just don't like the image that we're portraying. It makes this thing look like it's an electric project of fixing up the power plant and,
Mike,
and getting vehicles.
the size of the electric financing is exactly the same as what I talked to you about in August. Nothing has changed. And the 26% number is a ratio that Todd's used for modeling in terms of prospective joint use going forward. That's the only way that number got articulated, but the numbers have not changed.
Would you be more comfortable with it in the resolution, in the proposed action, where it talks about including certain smart grid related improvements and voltage conversion related improvements, project included the fiber network?
Start the improvements and extensions of the utility, including certain smart grid related improvements and voltage.
It's a smart grid, which is also a fiber network.
If you just scratch voltage conversion related improvements, then I don't care what you add to the smart grid part, just get the voltage related improvements.
Well, I don't have a problem with those. We're going to do those. I mean,
But it's not, it's nothing to do with this.
it isn't, but it could be. That's what he's saying, is that we're throwing this all together. Not that we have to take the whole 7,500, not that we have to use that money, we can still use our own. But it was included.
You wanna keep them separate.
I
Basically.
just want the public to, our electric utility ratepayers to know that we're spending money for a smart grid. That's all I really care about. It's just the image. Everything else I'm good with. I don't see the value of flexibility. If this one to come along at all, we're still gonna have the voltage conversion. We're still gonna have the power plant improvements. We still bought vehicles. We wouldn't need the flexibility on this bond. We just would be doing it. We already got the money, we'd be doing it. So I don't see why we need to, I understand what you're saying, Michael, about why you're out there doing it. Go ahead and give us more than we need and have the flexibility.
There's not more than you need. This is, if the design of the project, if something changes in the scope or scale of the related electric improvements otherwise, you've got the ability to not just be sitting on cash that you can't do anything with because it's bond proceeds only used for a project that's costing less than what you borrowed for. It's just being able to spread it to another important project in the community rather than just paying interest on proceeds that you don't need. That's all. It's just a different, the way you're viewing it is different than the way I view it.
That way I kinda call what you're saying.
Okay. Fourth time's the charm, Mike.
Alright, I got you.
Got me?
Yeah.
Sorry, I should've. It's been a long day for me too.
Yeah, I'm good. And
You're good without fiber being in there?
yeah. The smart grid takes your fiber.
Not everybody
It's
reads it
just-
that
I
way
just-
though.
Huh?
Not everybody reads smart grid.
Well,
fiber, but-
well, we're trying to fool. Maybe that's the whole purpose. Alright, I'm good.
Motion?
We had a motion in a second.
Oh, we did.
for discussion.
Remember,
We've changed it.
we're professional now.
Wait,
Yeah.
Kramer,
Yes.
Elway,
Yes.
Yes.
Barron, Woodhouse,
Yes.
Meyer. Yes.
Alright, agreed.
It's the capital improvement plans for both the electric and the communication. These were the same plans that were submitted on the 26th of March.
I wasn't here at that meeting. That's another reason we had our little discussion this morning, so Tom could bring you up to speed on what these were. I guess we need a motion for that, don't we, when we talk? So,
I'll make a motion.
all right, so motion second, and then we have some discussion on it, and this isn't, is this everything now? If you add the 5-year plan, is this, this is it?
Yeah, I took the plan that I put together in August, that was just the electric only, and integrated that in with this.
And this is only just capital, so we got O&M, all sorts of stuff out here. Okay? Any questions? You guys talked about floors, so let's try to get that. Rob, Steve.
Kramer,
Yes.
Meyer. Yes. Woodhouse.
Yes.
Elway,
Yes.
Barron.
Yes.
Well, we kind of talked about the next one, the financial analysis time. I just want to give us a brief summary so everybody knows what we're looking at.
Yep, and a quick comment as a peanut gallery member on the CIPs, I appreciate you adopting 5-year capital improvement plans. It's a goal that we have with a lot of utilities for them to be looking that far in the future. Unfortunately, that's not often the case, so that's a good document that you have that's living and breathing going forward. As you go through your next budget phase, I would highly recommend you review that. As far as the financial analyst, work, I think we've got I'll let Curtis chime in on some details, but from my perspective, we're rounding into the finish line in terms of making some decisions on the operations. though we know we've got some upward bound limitations as we've previously discussed in terms of those operating costs. We know our capital costs, we have known quantities on operational side. Todd is organizing that in the model with clearly defined changes in terms of some of the operational decisions that'll be made. And we'll have an actionable model that I'll be able to use to help market the financings on a go-forward basis. So I expect that to be running in shape within the next couple weeks here so that we can continue on the timeline as articulated. Curtis can probably speak to more detail, though he's upset that he's the guy having to talk through a numbers portion of the conversation. He's still there.
Curtis?
Hello. So, just to give you guys an update, we've continued to work through the